Well, the Orioles on Sunday night are going to be on ESPN once again on Sunday Night Baseball. And just before that, Baseball Tonight, Sunday Night Countdown, you'll be seeing our friend and our next guest, our friend Tim Kurkjian, back with us on GCR. Tim, it's Glenn. It's always great to catch up. Thank you for taking the time for us this morning.
My pleasure, Glenn.
So, a weird week for the Orioles, obviously, where we know they're really good. They just won a couple of series against the Phillies and the Yankees, who we had thought were the best teams in baseball going into that. And the pitching kind of falls apart for a little while until Grayson Rodriguez, delivers a huge start last night. As we acknowledge the Orioles are good and we know they're a contender, how much of the last 10 days been a reminder that they've lost 4 starting pitchers this season? They're going to have to address it if they want to win a World Series.
Yes, they're going to have to do that. You can't lose 3 pitchers of that magnitude for the season and then think everything's going to be okay. They are still 50-30 with a lot of things having gone wrong. But as we know, it's not good enough for them to just win a division or win 90-100 and make the playoffs. They're better than that. If they're going to advance once they get to October, they're going to have to address their starting pitching. And how they do that is not particularly easy. I mean, Jesus Luzardo of the Marlins is going to be available. He would certainly make some sense. Garrett Crochet of the White Sox is going to be available. But again, he's a relief pitcher who has been turned into a starting pitcher, has already passed his innings limit as far as what he's ever done in his career. Exactly how much help is he going to be? How great is he going to be the rest of the way? These are the really difficult questions that the Orioles have to answer, that Mike Elias has to answer. What do we do? Do we stand pat with what we have, or do we go make another big deal for a starting pitcher?
So let me ask a couple of those to follow up if I could, Tim, because the Crochet thing is fascinating to me. It seems like if you're really seeing a guy becoming a top-level pitcher in baseball in front of our eyes this season, then, in a world where there's no Corbin Burns, it could make some sense. But I don't think we can, kid ourselves and pretend like the innings aren't a thing and that, hey, just give it a shot anyway. Can you possibly acquire Garrett Crochet and believe that he's going to be able to make starts for you into September and October at this point?
Yeah, it's a big risk. I mean, his stuff is not a risk. His mentality is not a risk, but his situation is a risk. I did some research on this. I have never seen a relief pitcher work that many appearances, that many innings over X number of years, and then start on opening day like Garrett Crochet did. I'm telling you, it's unprecedented. So the real question is, how much does he have left for this season? But to get him, you're going to have to give up a fortune. He's a power left-hander. And is Mike Elias going to give up a fortune for a guy who they're not even sure will be pitching in October, and they're not sure he can be effective in October because of the innings? But again, this is a risk you take. Maybe he'll be great. Maybe he's a difference maker between being a contender and a champion. So it's a very, very tricky spot.
What would you think of Eric Fetty at this point, Tim? He to me is the one that I've just sort of come back to. You have another year of control. He's obviously discovered something during his time away in Korea. I don't think he's starting game 1 of a playoff series, but you don't need that. You've got that guy on your team. It seems like you need a game 3 starter, and it feels like the way that he's pitched, he could be that for you.
Yeah, you don't need a 1 or a 2. They already have that, and Grayson Rodriguez showed again last night why you're confident with him as a 2. Eric Fetty's had an interesting year. A couple of starts here lately, got knocked around just a little bit, but I'm a big believer, Glenn. The light goes on at all sorts of different times for pitchers and for players, and you're not even sure when or how they went on or when they're going off, but it seems the light has gone on for him. And again, the White Sox are in a position to make all sorts of moves, but they're also in a position that they have to rebuild and rebuild quickly, which means they're going to want the very best from the Orioles, and it'll be fascinating to see what happens.
Let me phrase it this way as far as what the Orioles are going to do, Tim. whoever the target ends up being, and we think they probably need bullpen help too, on top of the starting pitching help that they need. How far should they be willing to go? Like, Corbin Burnes is here for 1 year, and that has to make this year matter, but they do still have a young core that we believe is going to be competitive for years to come. So how far should Mike Elias be willing to go? I don't think anybody believes that Jackson Holliday would be on the table, but Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo, some of the other top prospects, should he be willing to part with someone, if not multiple, from that group in the name of this season and the opportunity that's there with Corbin Burnes?
Well, they're not trading Jackson Holliday, nor should they.
Yeah.
And Kobe Mayo's got tremendous talent. He would be in the big leagues with a lot of teams right now, and there are days I wonder why he's not in the big leagues with the Orioles. But I've said this a million times. This is when general managers earn all their money right now. This is the time you have to make really difficult decisions. So I can't see at the moment that Mike Elias is going to mortgage the entire future just to win this year before, Corbin Burnes potentially walks. I just don't think that's his MO. But he did prove with the Burnes trade that he's willing to go for it. The question is, how hard is he going to go for it? That's what the next month will tell us. The next 5 weeks are going to tell us everything we need to know about the 2024 Orioles.
Tim Kurkjian is with us. Of course, Orioles-Rangers, Sunday Night Baseball this week on ESPN. Tim, I wonder if, now that we're a couple of months in, and I feel like I asked you this question the last time we talked, have you deciphered any more? There was this immediate belief when David Rubenstein and his group came in that, like, now the Orioles can spend money and now they're going to have the opportunity. And he has played it very close to the vest. Every time he's talked publicly, he has deferred to, I'm going to let Mike Elias make those decisions and he won't tell us anything. Have you gotten any sense for what the reality of that might be in regards to whether it's Corbin Burnes as a free agent, whether it's have you gotten any sense of the willingness of this ownership group to start spending money here soon?
Well, I had a long talk with David Rubenstein, I would say, a month ago, and it was very interesting, and I was very impressed and with the way he speaks about baseball and how much he loves baseball. But that doesn't always translate to, I love the Orioles, I love baseball, I'm going to become Steve Cohen and pay everybody whatever they need and build a championship team here immediately. I didn't sense that, but that doesn't mean it's not in there. I think he's a very shrewd businessman. Nobody gets to this point without being a very shrewd businessman, and I think he's going to hold it very close to the vest until the time comes. Remember, that's how a lot of owners and general managers have done things for years. Dave Dombrowski is famous for not letting on about anything, and then pow, he signs somebody or trades for somebody. So maybe that's what the Orioles are going to do. Maybe we're not going to hear a peep from them, and then they make a big deal. But I can't say for sure because I haven't met David Rubenstein enough times to really recognize what he's planning on doing. But I do know this. He loves baseball and he loves the Orioles.
I all of those things, and he keeps talking about his like personal race to the finish line, right? Like that we're not slowing up here. And I boy, all that sounds great, and it's just to your point, we don't have those answers. Tim, is there anyone going towards the deadline? Like I know that obviously the conversation is it's seller's market, that all of the teams in the National League are in the playoff race, and so it's very hard to identify anyone besides, as you pointed out, like the White Sox and the Marlins that are definitely going to be trading. Is there anyone that you feel like could be maybe a surprise entrant onto the trade block over the course of the next month that maybe folks aren't talking about at the moment?
At this point, Glenn, I just don't see it because of exactly what you said. Every team in the National League has to feel like they're in it, and therefore they're not going to give up anything. So I think you're down to the two teams you mentioned, the Rockies, the A's, and the Angels, and everyone else is kind of in on this because they can't afford to give up on a season when if you make the playoffs, you can go to the World Series a la the Diamondbacks last year. So I just don't think all of a sudden Cincinnati's going to say, all right, we're out of this. We're going to trade our bet. Well, they wouldn't do it because they got all young players. But I'm just not sure that team is out there where they're going to give up when they have a chance to make the playoffs. And my guess is a month from now, the standings are going to look very similar to where they are right now. And therefore, I don't see Toronto trading Bichette or Guerrero. It should be just a fascinating next month.
Is there a viable, legitimate replacement for Craig Kimbrel? I got to admit to you, Tim, I was obsessed with the idea of Ryan Helsley, but as we just talked about, no, the Cardinals ain't out of it. I don't think there's any world in which that at the moment is going to end up being viable. Is there someone? I don't think it's going to be Mason Miller. It just seems like that price is too high, and there's just no way, knowing the Orioles and how they value their assets, that they'd be doing that for a closer, even of Mason Miller's ilk. Is there someone that would slide in as this is the closer and Craig Kimbrel has to bump down, or is it more likely that the Orioles just need to fortify with more leverage arms and perhaps have multiple closers or Craig Kimbrel and a B option?
Yeah, that's how I see it. I mean, Carlos Estevez of the Angels has had a very good year and is on a really good run right now, and he could really help the Orioles. Mm-hmm. But to bring him in and say, all right, you're now the closer on a championship caliber team, I think that's a little bit iffy. And I think they have bigger issues right now than the closer, because Kimbrel, he looked awfully good striking out 3 in 1 inning last night. I would fortify the other parts of the bullpen, but as we talked about, I would start with the starting rotation, get that fixed first, and then turn to the closer role, because I'm just not sure there's a closer out there that is significantly better than Craig Kimbrel.
Before I let you go, Tim, Anthony Santander is going to join us a little bit later on this morning, and obviously he's in the midst of a red-hot June, of course. Santander's a free agent at the end of the year, and I think a lot of people have kind of assumed in the last couple of seasons, hey, as we talked about Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, that perhaps the Orioles would just be moving on from this group of veteran outfielders, and they would have the next group ready to come in. But I've poked around a little bit, and I've gotten the sense that maybe there's more of an appetite for particularly Santander on a short-term deal, 3 years, something like that moving forward. Could that make sense to you? Even it feels like you're running out of positions for all of these guys to play that you have, but could it still make sense to you to see the Orioles try to keep Santander around for a few seasons?
Yes. He's going to have in these 3 years, last 2 and this, he's going to have 90 homers in 3 years, maybe more. And that's hard to find, especially when you're a switch hitter and you're not just a pure designated hitter. You can play the outfield. I'm a big prospects guy, but it's a really hard game to play, and you can tear it up in the minor leagues and get to the big leagues, and it just doesn't work. Well, it has worked for Santander in the big leagues, and I would be very hesitant to just let him go so another one of those young outfielders can come up and play every day when you already got a young outfielder who plays every day, who hits the ball out of the ballpark, and has had a absolutely stunningly good month of June. Yeah, so, yes, I would go great lengths to sign him short term at least and keep him for a couple more years.
Yeah, and as we reminded the other night, he doesn't have a bad arm either. That's
yes, that was a tremendous throw the other night.
Unbelievable. All right, so obviously we want everybody to watch Sunday Night Countdown, Baseball Tonight on Sunday ahead of Orioles-Rangers. But also, Tim, you want to remind everybody about the podcast you and your son are doing?
Yeah, it's called Is This Great Game or What? It's my son and I. We hopefully make you laugh. We hopefully you learn something. It's been tremendous fun. We had Aaron Boone on last week as our guest. He was hilariously funny. And so it's great. We're really having a good time, and I can't wait for Sunday Night Baseball to return to Baltimore. That's great.
We love that. You didn't get to the bottom with Aaron Boone if we can stop throwing at everybody now, right? We don't have to keep worrying about that the rest of the season, right?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I think we can be done with that. Tim Kurkjian, at Kurkjian_ESPN on Twitter, as always, is how you follow him. Tim, always appreciate you, man. Thank you for taking the time for us this morning.
My pleasure, Glenn. Thank you.